Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready, because we are about to step into a microscopic realm where, honestly, an epic drama is unfolding every single second. We're looking at the tale of two chemical worlds, ionic and molecular compounds. You can really think of the entire chemical universe as this fascinating, never-ending story of atoms just desperately seeking stability. And how do they actually find it? Well, by either trading or sharing their electrons. It's the fundamental mechanism that creates literally the entire world around us, and by the end of this masterclass, you're going to understand exactly how it works. Here is our game plan for today. We'll start with the quest for stability, look at how the periodic table acts as a cheat sheet, dive into ionic bonds and their properties, solve the formula puzzle together, explore molecular compounds, and wrap it all up by classifying our world. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. The quest for stability, and seeking that elusive noble gas status. So here is the core problem driving pretty much all of ordinary chemistry. Most atoms are inherently unstable. They desperately want the perfect, balanced electron count of a noble gas. To achieve this VIP status, electrons are either added, lost, or shared, which creates electrically charged particles that we call ions. When an atom loses electrons, it leaves behind more positive protons than negative electrons, right? That creates a positively charged ion known as a cation. On the flip side, when an atom gains electrons, it picks up an overall negative charge, becoming what's called an anion. Let's look at how the math of this transformation actually works using sodium. It's a great example. A neutral sodium atom has perfectly equal numbers, 11 positive protons and 11 negative electrons, so it has zero net charge. But to reach that sweet, sweet noble gas stability, it just sheds one single electron. Suddenly, the whole balance is tipped. It still has its 11 positive protons, but now only 10 negative electrons. That leaves it with an overall positive charge of 1, giving us the sodium cation. We write that with a little superscripted plus sign, like this, Na+. Moving right along to Section 2, your periodic table cheat sheet and predicting how these ions form. You might be wondering, do I just have to guess which atoms are going to gain or lose electrons? No way. The periodic table is literally a brilliant, built-in predictive tool. Let's break down the rules. Atoms of main group metals, way over on the far left of the table, they tend to lose electrons. Group 1 elements lose 1 to form 1+ ions, and group 2 elements lose 2 to form 2+ ions. Now zoom over to the far right. Those non-metal elements tend to gain electrons. Group 17 elements gain 1, forming 1- ions, and group 16 elements gain 2, forming 2- ions. The only trick is when you move toward the center of the table. Transition metals can be a bit sneaky and exhibit variable charges that aren't as perfectly predictable. Copper, for instance, can be a 1+ or a 2+. Okay, it is time to pause the lecture for a quick test yourself moment. Let's see if you can apply the logic we just talked about. If you have an ion with 34 protons and 36 electrons, what is its symbol and what is its name? Think about it. The atomic number, 34, tells you the element itself, and the difference between those protons and electrons tells you the charge. Did you get it? Let's break it down. The element with 34 protons is selenium, and because there are 2 extra negative electrons, 36 electrons, compared to those 34 protons, the result is a 2- charge. That makes it Ce2-, otherwise known as the selenide ion. If you nailed that, excellent work. Which brings us to Section 3, Ionic Bonds and their properties, where opposites attract. Now that we know how these oppositely charged cations and anions form, what actually happens when they get near each other? This is the absolute crucial point, the ionic bond. When a metal readily loses electrons and a nonmetal readily gains them, a full transfer occurs. Think of it kind of like giving an old winter jacket to a friend who desperately needs it. It's a permanent transfer. The result? You now have a positive ion and a negative ion sitting there. And because opposites attract, they are pulled together by really powerful electrostatic forces. That magnetic-like attraction, that is the ionic bond. And let me tell you, these ionic bonds are incredibly tough. You can often spot an ionic compound just by looking at its physical properties. Consider normal table salt, which is sodium chloride. To break those electrostatic attractions and melt solid table salt into a liquid, you have to heat it to a massive 801 degrees Celsius. And to boil it, you'd have to hit over 1400 degrees. That number right there perfectly dramatizes just how strong these bonds really are. And here is another completely fascinating physical property. Solid ionic compounds do not conduct electricity, but molten ionic compounds, they absolutely do. Why is that? Well, electricity is simply the flow of charged particles. When stuck in a rigid, solid lattice, those charged ions can't move anywhere. They're locked in. But if you melt them down into a liquid, those ions are suddenly free to flow past each other, which means they conduct electricity perfectly. Moving to Section 4, solving the formula puzzle by balancing ionic charges.
So how do we systematically write out these chemical formulas? The golden rule here is that an ionic compound must be electrically neutral overall, meaning the total positive charges have to perfectly balance out the total negative charges. Let's walk through the exact steps of solving this puzzle. Step 1. Identify the charges. For this, let's use aluminum, which forms a 3+ cation, and oxygen, which forms a 2- anion. Step 2. Find the least common multiple. We have to do this because neither charge is a perfect multiple of the other. The least common multiple of 3 and 2 is 6. And finally, step 3. Write the formula with the correct subscripts to hit that target number.
See how this works out mathematically? We need 2 of those aluminum ions to get a total of 6 positive charges. And we need 3 of the oxide ions to get a total of 6 negative charges. 6 plus, 6 minus, they balance out perfectly to neutral. So the formula is Al2O3. And I really want to ground this in reality for you. Al2O3 isn't just a jumble of letters and numbers floating around in some textbook. If you've ever seen a beautiful blue sapphire gemstone, you are actually looking at Al2O3, a crystal compound of aluminum and oxygen. Now, sometimes the ions aren't just single atoms flying solo. This introduces something called polyatomic ions. These are tightly bonded groups of atoms that act together as a single discrete charged unit. For example, ammonium is 1 nitrogen and 4 hydrogens, all acting together to carry a 1+ charge. Nitrate is 1 nitrogen and 3 oxygens, carrying a 1- charge. If you are studying chemistry, these are the essential units you absolutely need to memorize for sure, because they will show up everywhere. Let's see how we write formulas with these polyatomic units using an everyday example you probably have in your kitchen right now: baking powder. Baking powder contains calcium dihydrogen phosphate. Calcium is a 2+ cation. Dihydrogen phosphate is a polyatomic anion with a 1- charge. So to balance that 2+ calcium, we need 2 of the entire 1- dihydrogen phosphate units. To show this clearly in the formula, we use parentheses around the whole polyatomic ion, and we put a little subscript 2 on the outside. It's just a really elegant way to keep the puzzle perfectly neutral. Let's pivot now to Section 5, molecular compounds, and the art of sharing electrons. So what about the elements that don't want to permanently transfer their electrons but prefer to share them instead? This brings us to the second kingdom of our chemical universe, the covalent bond. A molecular or covalent compound consists of discrete, neutral molecules. Rather than a metal giving up an electron to a nonmetal, this sharing usually happens when 2 nonmetals combine. Instead of a full transfer, they share the electron between their positively charged nuclei. I like to think of this like 2 friends sharing an umbrella in the rain, rather than one person just giving their umbrella away completely. They stay bonded together by sharing that resource. We can now clearly compare these 2 totally distinct chemical realms side by side. On the left, we have ionic, that's a metal plus a nonmetal. They transfer electrons, and it results in tough crystals with incredibly high melting points. On the right, we have molecular, that's a nonmetal plus a nonmetal. They share electrons, and this often results in gases, low-boiling liquids, or low-melting solids. The fundamental mechanism of how that bond handles the electrons dictates the actual physical reality of the substance. And finally, Section 6, classifying our chemical world. Knowing what we know now, we can actually start to quickly classify the pure substances we interact with every single day. I want to reflect on this overarching quote directly from our source material. The transfer and sharing of electrons among atoms govern the chemistry of the elements. It's just an absolute truth. Whether it's the solid sodium chloride salt you sprinkle on your dinner or the molecular liquid water you drink, all of these physical properties come down to the microscopic behavior of electrons simply seeking a stable arrangement. But I want to leave you with a provocative thought here. We've talked about a perfect transfer in ionic bonds and sharing in molecular bonds. But if the periodic table gives us rules for those 2 extremes, what mysterious shades of gray lie hidden right in the middle? Like, are there compounds that don't perfectly fit into either box? The answer is absolutely yes.
chemistry is full of fascinating exceptions and complex intermediate bonds. But, well, that is a story for our next explainer.